Welcome to the finale of Season 1 of our Foundation series. This has been an amazing series so far, and of course we're going to continue it, but this is just the end of Season 1, the first portion of what we're going over. We're going to finish with the climax of Joseph's story. Last time we talked about how he became the ruler of Egypt, and how he saved the entire world from famine. But let's think for a second, who else would this famine impact? Well, of course, Joseph's family. Not only Israel, but also all of his sons and his family that are in the land of Canaan. Of course, it doesn't take long for this famine to spread, and over the first couple of years of the famine, the land of Canaan started running out of food completely. So much so that Jacob says that the family should go and get grain from Egypt, just like everybody else in the land is doing. Behold, I have heard that there is grain for sale in Egypt. Go down and buy grain for us there, that we may live and not die. Now, of course, Jacob sends his very capable sons to go do this. However, he keeps one son behind with him, and that is Benjamin. Something that we haven't talked about much in terms of Joseph so far is who his mother is. Joseph's mother is Rachel, and of course this is Jacob's first true love, the woman that he wanted to marry, the one that he considers his true wife. Rachel only had 2 children out of the 12 sons of Israel, and that was Joseph and Benjamin. You have to keep in mind as we read the rest of this story and as we go through Joseph's timeline and the ancestry of Israel, that these 2 are important above the rest, especially for Jacob, especially for Israel himself, right? Joseph and Benjamin are sons of Rachel, and that means a lot to him. They are clearly his favorites out of everybody, and now that Joseph, he believes, is dead, Benjamin is the last son that he has. We can even see this in the text, but we'll get there in just a second. So the 10 sons of Israel minus Joseph and Benjamin go to Egypt to talk to the Pharaoh's chief advisor. Of course, this being Joseph, but they don't know that it's him. This is a really interesting circumstance here. As the Bible tells us, they don't actually speak to one another in the same language. Joseph is keeping his identity concealed, even so much as to speak Egyptian to them rather than in their Hebrew language. This is a really interesting choice that he makes because he doesn't want to divulge his identity to them quite yet. He uses a translator in the room actually to go from Egyptian to Hebrew so that they don't even think that he can speak Hebrew in the first place. So the brothers stand in front of Joseph, not knowing that it's him, and begin to ask him for grain, just like everybody else is doing. They want to buy grain. They brought money and livestock and different things in order to get the grain from Egypt. Now, Joseph talks to them like anybody else that would be coming to buy grain, but he does talk pretty sternly to them, and he asks some weird questions and even accuses them of being spies. He says, "You are spies. You have come to see the nakedness of the land." And of course they defend themselves, saying that they're not spies. They're just 12 brothers that come from the land of Canaan. Their father is Jacob, and that one of their brothers is back at home and one of their brothers is now dead. Joseph continues to mess with them more and more, calling them spies and not wanting to believe the words that they're saying. You know, they're saying that they're 12 brothers and one is dead and one is back at home, but he doesn't see that last brother and he doesn't really believe what they're saying, right? He's kind of playing with them a little bit. So then he puts them on a mission to go back to Canaan and to bring that last brother with them. However, he'll need to keep a collateral, and that is one of his brothers. So then Simeon, out of the 10 brothers, is chosen to be bound up in front of the brothers and to be held captive in Egypt by Joseph. We don't get a lot of details about how Joseph treated him, if he was nice to him, if he was mean to him, if he put him in the pit that he himself was in. We really don't get a lot of details here. But the point of this is to hold one brother captive so that they can have an incentive to come back to Egypt with Benjamin. And then after taking Simeon captive, he sent them on their way. He actually gives them the grain that they came to buy as well, making sure that they had provisions in order to survive the journey there and back. And also he gives them their money back at the top of their sacks as well. So he gives them the grain totally for free. And this kind of freaks them out a little bit as they stop and they reach in and realize that they have their money that they were supposed to give to the Pharaoh. This is a strange thing for them because they're like, uh-oh, are we in trouble for this? This is not a good thing. Like, was there a clerical error? What happened here? And in fact, they even blame God here, saying, what is this that God has done to us? Thinking that God may have put the money back in their sacks and they're going to get blamed for it. So they get back to Israel in the land of Canaan and they begin to talk with their father about what happened. They recount the story about how this man spoke harshly to them, and then he demanded that they bring their youngest brother with them back to to Egypt. In fact, they even took Simeon captive. Now all they need to do is take Benjamin back to Egypt and everything will be fine. They'll get Simeon back and it'll all be good. However, this terrifies Jacob. He is not into this whatsoever. Jacob says, "You have bereaved me of my children. Joseph is no more, and Simeon is no more, and now you would take Benjamin? All this has come against me." But then Reuben is so confident that he says, "You can even kill my 2 sons if I don't bring Benjamin back to you. Just let us take him there so that we can get Simeon and we can get the grain that we need and we can survive through this famine." But Israel absolutely will not have it. He's not going to send Benjamin to Egypt because he fears that something's going to happen to him and that the Pharaoh wants to do something specifically to Benjamin. This is a terrifying thing for him because he sees, as Benjamin is definitely his favorite, right? Coming from his favorite wife, coming from that line that he wanted originally, these are who he considers to be his 2 main sons, Joseph and Benjamin, and Joseph has been dead for several years now. So he has to protect Benjamin at all costs. And as we enter into chapter 43, we see that the famine is continuing and some time has passed since the last chapter. We see that no, Jacob is still not willing to send Benjamin, but they are running out of food. He says to them, "Please go back to Egypt and buy a little bit more food." But all of the brothers tell him, "There's no way that we can do this. The man told us if we don't come back with our youngest brother, that we're going to be in big trouble." And of course, Simeon's still in captivity there. Who knows what's happening to him? Is he still even alive anymore? They clearly tell their father Israel that if he doesn't send Benjamin with them, they're not going to go back. So they're kind of at a stalemate at this time. But they begin to explain to him exactly what the situation is and how dire it is. And Judah finally is the one that convinces him to allow him to bring Benjamin back to Egypt. Now this is after much convincing and Judah saying that he'll take complete blame for anything that ever happens and that he will return Benjamin to Israel. Also reminding his father of how much time has been wasted since he hasn't let them take Benjamin in the first place. So they packed up all their bags, including extra gifts and double the money that they needed for the grain, but they also actually added the original money that they were going to pay for the first section of grain as well. So there's a lot of stuff they were trying to do to get on the good side of the Egyptians. So they took all of this stuff and stood in front of Joseph once more. But when Joseph saw Benjamin, he told the steward of his house to bring all of these men to his house in order for them to have a dinner. At first, all of the brothers are terrified because they think they're getting punished for having the money being in their sacks earlier on. But then the steward of the house said, "Peace be to you." Basically, it's not about the money. Then Joseph has all of his household servants and everybody that works for him prepare this amazing meal and party basically for his brothers. And of course, when he sees Benjamin, he's overcome with emotion. We're going to see this a couple of different times with Joseph, where he is actually overcome with so much emotion that he can't keep the facade of who he's trying to be as this Egyptian chieftain. So he actually runs away and finds a place to cry by himself. And at the end of this chapter, we see that they eat and they drink and they are merry and they're having a great time and everybody is served food. But on Benjamin's plate is 5 times the portion of anybody else's. But here in chapter 44, we see the rest of Joseph's plan for his brothers. He says this, "Fill the men's sacks with food as much as they can carry, and put each man's money in the mouth of his sack, and put my cup, the silver cup, in the mouth of the sack of the youngest, with his money for the grain." And after Joseph has his servants do this, he says to send his brothers on their way, but he wants the servants to follow them and actually confront them about this cup that is in Benjamin's bag. So the servant catches up with them and accuses them of stealing from the house that they were just in. And of course, all the brothers are denying this. Of course, they didn't steal anything. Why would they steal anything? They've been so nice to them and they've been doing so much. Why would they take anything? But then they say, if any of us has anything, then, you can even kill the one who has it, and the rest of us will become your servants. But the servant says, whichever one of you has it will become our servant, and the rest of you will be innocent. And so they begin to open their bags and investigate what is inside of them. And of course, Benjamin has the silver cup. At this point, the rest of the brothers are terrified because they've promised Jacob that they're going to bring back his favorite son, Benjamin, and that there's nothing that would happen to him. And just when they were about to get on the road to go back home, this happens. So now Benjamin is going to become the servant of some chieftain of the Pharaoh. In this moment, they even tear their clothes and begin to mourn Benjamin. It's a pretty intense thing that's happening here. So all of them have to pack up their donkeys and go back into the city. And here is where Judah steps up yet again. Joseph, of course, accuses them of stealing and says that whoever had it is now his servant and the rest of them can leave. But Judah can't allow this to happen. He made a promise to Israel that he would bring back Benjamin. And so he pleads his case. For a large majority of this next section, we see as Judah recounts the entire story of what's been going on and just tries to be as truthful as he possibly can. Another interesting line within this recounting of the story is actually something that Israel says from the point of view of Judah. He says that, my wife bore me 2 sons. While Judah and all these other men are sons of Israel as well, it seems as if Israel is only counting these 2 as his true sons. Again, this may come back down to the relationship that he has with Rachel and Leah. He did not want to marry Leah. He was deceived into marrying Leah. And so Rachel he sees as his true wife. Then at the end of this chapter and the end of Judah's recounting, he pleads to be taken as a servant instead of Benjamin because of the promises that he made to his father. Then here in chapter 45 is where everything breaks for Joseph. He can't hold it anymore. He can't keep up the facade. And he immediately orders all of the Egyptians out of the room. Then in front of his brothers, he begins to weep. He, in fact, weeps so loudly that his whole entire household can hear it, and even Pharaoh's household next to it. Then, I'm sure, in a shocking reveal that he can actually understand Hebrew, he begins speaking to his brothers, and he says that he is Joseph. The brothers are instantly stunned, that they can't say anything, but Joseph is sure to console them and say that he's not upset at them. Joseph even understands and tells them that this is God's plan, that God sent him here in order to preserve their family and to preserve many survivors. And then as he's reconciling with his brothers, Joseph hatches his last plan to help his family, which obviously he had no idea the ramifications of. He asks them to come to Goshen in Egypt, which is a beautiful farmland, and to be able to settle there with all of their family and livestock, and to be able to build the family, to be able to continue to live and have as much as they need. Joseph personally promises that he will take care of them and that he will provide for them. Then they spend the rest of their time in Egypt talking with Joseph, reconciling with him, and he weeps with them, he laughs with them, he talks with them, and figures out what life is actually like now. It's been several years since he's seen them, and I'm sure the brothers are shocked that he's not upset at them. Now, after this, Pharaoh actually finds out what happened as well, as he sees that Joseph's brothers have come into Egypt. And Pharaoh's not upset at this at all. He's actually super excited, and he helps them to figure out where they're going to be in Egypt and how they can make this plan happen. Remember, Joseph saved all of Egypt, and in fact the whole world, with the plan that he came up with and the deciphering of the Pharaoh's dreams. So of course, this Pharaoh in particular had great favor with Joseph and his family, and he really gave them whatever they needed. So they took wagons from Egypt all the way back to Jacob. And at first, he's a little bit hard to convince that Joseph is actually alive. But eventually, he comes to the conclusion that this is true. Then Israel and all of his people, including his wives, his sons, his daughters, his grandsons, his granddaughters, everybody gets on these wagons and goes back to Egypt. There were 70 people in all. The beginning of the nation of Israel. Now, we don't have time to go through every little detail in the next few chapters, but let me hit the highlights. Joseph continues in his role as the chief to the Pharaoh, and he continues to make Egypt great. Also, we see the recurring theme of the second son becoming the most important son, or having the greater blessing. The same thing happens with Joseph's sons. Joseph actually brings them into Israel as he's dying to be blessed by him. And Manasseh, being the older one, Jacob places him at the right hand of Jacob. And then Ephraim, he places at the left hand being the lesser dominant. And so he thinks that Manasseh is going to be blessed by the right hand and that the firstborn will get the firstborn's blessing. However, Jacob switches his hands and he puts the right hand on Ephraim and the left hand on Manasseh. And Joseph is confused by this, but Jacob clearly says that the younger will be greater. And so that theme continues over and over. Then in chapters 49 and 50, we see the last words of Israel. Of course, at this point, he's 147 years old. He's lived an amazing life, a crazy life, even wrestling with God. And now we're seeing the end of it. He blesses his sons before he goes, and then he dies. And in chapter 50, we actually get this really interesting moment that shows the true character of Joseph as well. His brothers begin to get really terrified that he was just being nice to them because their father was still alive. But then whenever his father died, that maybe he would hold this grudge against them for him being sold into slavery and everything that happened to him during those years. However, Joseph says this, and it's one of my favorite verses in the entire Bible. "Do not fear, for am I in the place of God? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today." This shows the extent of maturity and growth and holiness that Joseph had. The fact that he'd held no grudges against his brothers. It's crazy to think about. In the power that he had, he could have instantly had them killed or sold into slavery or anything else, but he wanted to save his family. Not just for his father's sake, but for their sake as well. This is why I love Joseph so much. He has such a good heart, and even with all the power in the world, he still doesn't take advantage of it. He uses it for God's glory and God's glory alone, and recognizes that the evil things that were done to him in the past were used by God in order to build something beautiful. So amazing to see, and I love the story of Joseph. Now, this is the end of season 1 of our Foundation series. However, we will continue very soon, so just hold on and we'll get into season 2 as this blessing of being in Egypt begins to turn into a nightmare for the people of Israel. If you really like our Foundation series and you want to support us, the best way to help us is actually through our Patreon. YouTube oftentimes does not promote these videos in the best way, but I promise to you I'm not going to stop this series. And I think it's going to be something amazing for showing you how real the kingdom is and how it just continues to be amazing through these stories that we see in the Bible, these historical things that actually happened. So if you're one of those people that is getting a lot out of this content and getting a lot out of this series, I could really use your support over on Patreon at patreon.com/thesnipelife. Even if it's just $5 a month, or if you wanted to go all the way up to $25 or $50 a month, that would be really amazing if you could help in any way. Thank you so much, and we'll see you on the next one.